Filmmaking at any level costs money, but it doesn't have to cost millions. The size of your ideas is almost always going to be bigger than the size of your wallet. But today, there are more creative solutions to the dreaded budget problem than ever. In this series, we look at how you can most effectively make a small-scale movie with large-scale ambitions. This is Low Budget Filmmaking, Episode 3, Post-Production. Subscribe to StudioBinder and enable notifications to find filmmaking tips for all budgets. Now, it's time to cut our masterpiece. Post-production is where all the footage that was captured during production is put together into a final product. It includes editing, coloring, sound design, visual effects, and more. Typically, each of these elements require money. On even a mid-budget Hollywood movie, post-production and all the steps it entails can cost millions of dollars. But if you don't have millions at your disposal, fear not. You can still get your movie finished.
Here is a piece of film. This piece of film must be up on the screen. This is what happened, man. Where is this part of the film? What are you gonna have, a blank spot on the film? What are you gonna do? You gotta find each missing piece and tape this in.
Like with many other elements of filmmaking, digital technology has democratized editing. If you have a computer, you can edit. So for a tech-savvy filmmaker working with a very tight budget, editing your movie yourself may be the best way to go.
And the Oscar goes to Honora Sean Baker.
Editing your own film has its perks. You can control your own destiny, putting as many hours into your project as you feel it needs. Shane Carruth, for example, worked on his cut of Primer for 2 years. This kind of time commitment would be much more difficult to get out of an editor for hire, who may have to prioritize projects that can offer them more money. But, of course, there is a reason editing one's own film is rare. It can be invaluable to get another person's eyes on a project, especially someone who isn't influenced by what they saw on set, and who has more experience putting a movie together in the editing room. The solution, then, can be similar to how you may source the rest of your crew. Find an editor who is personally invested in the movie and will put in the work without a large paycheck. For the relatively low-budget Everything Everywhere All at Once, the Daniels tapped editor Paul Rogers, who also happened to be a good friend of theirs. The three collaborated on the film remotely, sending different cuts to each other throughout the process. Rogers describes,
"This film was made by a lot of friends, so every day I was kind of spending time with these people that I cared about. Even if I wasn't seeing them, I was looking at their work, and I was proud of them and excited, and also I felt a lot of pressure because I didn't want to do wrong by them."
Are you paying attention? I cannot talk now. Unless you can help me with my taxes.
But reaching picture lock is only the beginning. Budgeting will always need to cover finishing costs, such as sound and color.
To now pronounce you as husband and wife, you may seal your promises with a kiss.
There are a few ways to save money when it comes to creating your soundscape. If you are like David Lynch or Shane Carruth, you can take on the sound design yourself. For Skinamarink, director Kyle Edward Ball cut costs by sourcing his sound effects from a free online database. The same goes for the film's score. John Carpenter describes his penny-pitching approach to the iconic music of Halloween, which he composed and performed himself.
I had to do the music to Halloween in about 3 days. I had to do the whole score so I could go in and perform it and get out.
A soundtrack may also require licensing pre-existing music. Depending on the song, this can be a steep cost. So the first rule of thumb is to avoid well-known music. Then, reach out to the musician or their label personally to pitch them on your film and why their song is perfect for it. Jim Cummings explains his approach to getting Aphex Twin in his trailer.
I cut it to that song and then reached out to Warp Records, and they were like, send us the movie. And then I sent them the trailer and then sent them the movie, and they were like, oh yeah, that's totally fine, use it.
For color, it can be more difficult to work around budget limitations. Because it's such a specialized and technical skill, finding a colorist for cheap is rare, though not impossible. Christopher Nolan found one way to avoid paying a lot for coloring on following: removing color altogether.
The nice thing about black and white is you eliminate one massive set of variables in terms of balancing your lights with the natural daylight that's around them.
And finally, there are visual effects. The simplest solution to reducing your VFX budget is by reducing the amount of VFX required in your film. This begins in your script, but it can also mean leaning on practical effects. The Green Knight, for example, pulled off stunning fantastical effects with relatively little resources. And VFX supervisor Eric Sandin explains that much of this was because of the practical work that went on set. David Lowery allowed us to take the performances that worked best and fit the performances in between the mountains and block them walking around. Then we went back in and refined it. This was not CG, but in-camera effects, stitching together lots of environments. Cutting VFX costs can result from experimentation and thinking outside the box. For the creator, director Gareth Edwards bucked the typical VFX process, which usually involves expensive pre-planning and the hiring of concept and previs artists, who outline what the look of the movie will be. Instead, Edwards opted for something different.
Let's shoot the movie, let's edit it, and then when we know what's in the film, let's give those frames to our designer, James Klein, and his team, and they can paint in the science fiction of exactly what's in the movie. So it's like a way more efficient thing.
Once your film is complete, there's still more work to be done. While distribution and marketing are technically outside of the filmmaking process, for low-budget films, they can often fall on the shoulders of the filmmaker.
So this is all we got left, so you guys can't be just putting them everywhere. You gotta put them strategically, okay?
Got it.
Do you have it, Mike?
Yes.
Without distribution and marketing, no one will see the movie you've worked so hard on. So it's important to consider these elements when making and budgeting your film. The most common route for low-budget features to obtain traditional distribution is through festivals. Almost all of the films mentioned in this series so far found distribution that way. But securing distribution isn't a given, particularly depending on the festival your film premieres at. Bigger distributors usually only attend bigger-name festivals like Sundance, TIFF, and Cannes. But if your film gets enough buzz at a smaller festival, it can have a chance at getting the attention of a distributor as well. While it's more rare, a low-budget film can also find distribution outside the festival circuit. With both The Evil Dead and Evil Dead 2, Sam Raimi rented out theaters and made his premieres as over-the-top as possible, parking ambulances out front and designing custom tickets. This drove up word of mouth and helped Raimi get meetings with distributors.
And that is the stupidest thing I ever heard of. Jesus Christ.
Today, distribution isn't only made possible by distribution companies. A filmmaker can decide to distribute their film themselves. This can mean anything from simply posting their movie to YouTube or putting it up on VOD services. If you take this path, you will likely also be in charge of your own marketing as well. Large budget films are usually able to rely on their stars to participate in press junkets and garner interest. Low budget movies, meanwhile, typically don't have this option available to them, so they need to create intrigue simply through the content of their film. With social media, it is simpler than ever to create your own marketing campaign at very little cost. Skinamarink, for example, generated word-of-mouth buzz after pieces of it were leaked on TikTok. This attention eventually earned Skinamarink its own, more official distribution deal with a theatrical and streaming release. High-impact marketing for low-budget films often relies on thinking outside the box. Paranormal Activity, shot for roughly $15,000, used a night vision camera to film a test screening's audience reaction. It then used that footage as its primary advertisement, spreading the word that it was a terrifying film, not for the faint of heart. The result was a box office phenomenon.
One last thing, I want to thank the Academy for recognizing a truly independent film. This film was made on the blood, sweat, and tears of incredible indie artists, and long live independent film. Yeah, okay, thanks.
The first rule of low-budget post-production: there are no rules. Perhaps more than any other stage, post-production can be what you make of it, and what your film requires. Whether you take matters into your own hands, or work with a tight-knit group, all that matters is getting your film across the finish line. Feeling inspired? Get started with StudioBinder's pre-production software. That's all for now. Remember, the indie process can be grueling, but in the end, it can be just as rewarding.